Let us introduce you to the beauty of NFP with Natural Plan. It brings together doctors, scientists, clergy, fertility coaches, NFP teachers, and couples practicing NFP to share experiences and insights about why natural family planning is worth it. We hear from couples like Seth and Elizabeth about their experience with NFP.
Hi, we're Seth and Elizabeth Timpey from Colorado.
Thanks for joining us today as we introduce a topic that has made a huge difference to our marriage, natural family planning.
Natural Plan is a video series that will introduce you to natural family planning through several short videos. In these videos, you'll learn about the science behind NFP, about its effectiveness, and become introduced to the different methods of NFP.
We will hear from doctors, scientists, and clergy touching on both medical and spiritual aspects of NFP. We will also meet real people like us practicing NFP who want to share their experiences about natural family planning.
Together, we've taught over 320 couples how to practice NFP.
So many people today are looking for an all-natural lifestyle. Couples come to NFP classes for that reason, because natural family planning is natural.
Using NFP has brought many graces to our marriage, and we can't imagine our lives without it.
Dr. Lauren Rubal speaks about fertility basics and the different methods of NFP.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lauren Rubal, MD. I'm an OBGYN with a specialization in fertility. I'm going to speak with you today about the fertility cycle, how our bodies work, and understanding the medical side of NFP. To start, natural family planning is based on understanding the complementary nature of our male and female reproductive systems. A woman's reproductive system changes almost daily, and the changing hormones create a pattern of fertile and non-fertile times within her cycle. Fertility awareness is centered on recognizing the phases of a woman's fertility cycle, where she learns to recognize external, observable signs that reflect the internal hormonal shifts that drive her fertility cycle each month. External signs of fertility show what is happening internally. These external observable signs are called biomarkers, which can be recorded throughout the fertility cycle. It is the analysis of this information, of the biomarkers, which allows you to understand where you are in your cycle and to manage your fertility. A woman's fertility cycle can be divided into 3 phases. It's a wonderful process driven by hormones released from the brain and the ovaries that work together to create times or phases in each cycle when you are non-fertile and a time when you are fertile. Phase 1 of each cycle is a non-fertile phase that includes menstruation and a few days immediately following it. Phase 2 is the fertile time when new life can be conceived. It includes the days before ovulation, ovulation, and a few days after ovulation. This is also referred to as the fertile window. Phase 3 is the second longer non-fertile time, beginning after ovulation and continuing until the end of the cycle. Just like we have a lot of choices when buying a car or shoes, today there are several methods of NFP, so you'll be glad to hear there are options. What are the different methods of NFP? Well, each NFP method is focused on tracking one or more signs of female fertility, which are also called biomarkers. We can group these various methods into one of 4 categories: a basic calendar method, cervical mucus, symptothermal, and symptohormonal methods. The next group of methods are called symptothermal methods, or STM for short. These methods observe cervical mucus and changes in temperature in a cross-checking manner to define the fertile window. Symptothermal methods include couple-to-couple leagues STM and the SymptoPro method.
Father Paul shares inspirational words of wisdom and faith about theology of the body and NFP.
Hello, my name is Father Paul, and I'm a Catholic priest. Over these past years of ministry as a priest, I've been able to learn the teachings of St. John Paul II on the theology of the body. And theology of the body and natural family planning go hand in hand. But don't worry, not going to give you a homily. Instead, we've asked a few couples to send in their questions about natural family planning, and I'm going to try to answer them as best as I can with the teachings of the theology of the body. Here we go. Our first question is from Julie and Tom in Connecticut. They ask, why does the Catholic Church teach theology of the body? Why does it matter what I do with my body? Why doesn't the church just get out of my bedroom? And believe me, we don't want to be there. We are made in God's image and likeness. God made us, and He made us male and female, and you are your body. We're people with souls and bodies. We're both, soul and body, fully integrated into one, not just having a body, not a soul trapped in a body. And so what we do with that body matters because it's me. We need to choose well what we do with our bodies. So in other parts of our life where it might pertain to diet or exercise or good rest, and they're always telling me to get more sleep, even the protection of our physical life, we're told to wear a life jacket when we go boating, to fasten our seatbelt in the car or on the plane. And so in all of these ways, we're taking care of our body, which is part of us. And that also includes our sexuality. We would never allow our body to be used merely for the gratification of another person. That would hurt our body and even our soul. And so in all of these ways, the church cares for us. The church cares about what we do with that body because it's part of how we'll be saved. It matters with respect to heaven. Here's our second question. This one comes from Chris and Gemma in Georgia. And they ask, what's wrong with contraception? What's the difference between natural family planning and contraception? Is it just Catholic birth control? Well, we've got the answer for that too.
Dr. Mike Manhart shares important information and studies about the impact NFP has on marriage.
For someone who's just starting NFP, I say there's 3 or 4 immediate benefits that they'll probably see. First, you're learning how your fertility works, when you're fertile, when you're not. That knowledge is absolutely powerful. And it's like eating properly or exercising regularly. NFP just helps you to live well. Second, fertility is no longer a woman's issue or a man's issue to deal with. NFP invites both of you to manage your fertility together. It's a shared responsibility, something you do as a team. Third, it's completely safe. It's well documented, but rarely mentioned, that for every 100 women who start using the pill or an IUD, 35 of them will stop using in a year or less. And 65% of those women stop because of side effects. Now, would you buy a car when you know that 1 out of every 5 customers will trade it in for something different in less than a year? Finally, NFP is low cost. Many will say my insurance gives me contraceptives for free, and that's true, but you're paying for that prescription in higher premiums, higher copays, and higher taxes.
Before you get into the long-term benefits of NFP in a marriage, could you speak a little more about NFP and contraceptives, comparing the effect both have on couples and marriages?
There is some published research using in-depth interviews with NFP users and contraceptive users that highlight some fascinating differences in their perceptions and attitude. NFP users see fertility as a natural process, like breathing or sleeping, that's simply to be lived with and monitored, while contraceptive users see it as a medical problem, to be controlled, suppressed, or even blocked altogether. NFP use helps build self-control because of the periodic abstinence, and users consistently state that this helps both themselves and it helps their relationships with others. Contraceptive users never mention this. NFP users tend to trust their partner and the woman's signs of fertility, while contraceptive users put their trust in the pill or a device, not their partner. On a spiritual level, NFP users tend to see fertility as a gift from God. It allows them to be co-creators with God when conceiving, and they see themselves as more open to God's will. Contraceptive users, in contrast, see fertility as something to be controlled, and God or any idea of something larger than themselves is just completely excluded from the picture. Dr. Richard Faring from Marquette University and I have been exploring divorce rates in NFP users and non-users in 2 large studies of American women. What we found in both studies was that the choice of family planning method has a significant influence on the odds of divorce among women who were ever married. In our 2021 study of over 2,500 women, those who had ever used the pill or had been sterilized had a 44 to 57% increased likelihood of being divorced compared to women who had never used the pill or were not sterilized. On the flip side, those who had ever used NFP had a 31% lower likelihood of divorce compared to those who never used NFP. We published a larger study of over 5,000 ever married women in 2023 and found similar results. Women who used the pill increased their odds of divorce by 53%. Those who were sterilized increased the odds about 30%. Interestingly, condom use and a husband with a vasectomy doubled the likelihood of divorce, 200% more likely. NFP use reduced the odds by 34%. Now, this doesn't mean that NFP users will never get divorced, but it does say that NFP significantly lowers the risk, while using contraceptives clearly increases the risks.
We witness a men and women's roundtable discussion from couples who practice NFP in their own lives.
I first came to know NFP, well, the first time I actually ever heard of it was as we were going through our marriage prep classes with the church, and it's been interesting. It's been a learning experience. Been, trying to figure it all out as we go along, and love to hear what your guys' experience has been going through the process.
When we were going through it as part of the requirement for getting married, it's like just being blown away at how amazing the human body is, and God has a design, and like this is meant, this relationship between men and women is supposed to be built this way, and there's a reason for these cycles. But just kind of the fact of how amazing the human body is, like why are not more people learning about these things, and then what it can do for a marriage and just that relationship that it builds. So
I feel like it's one of those things that you're never going to hear about it unless you're looking for it, right?
Or if you're required before marriage.
Or if you're required to do it. But it makes so much more sense. And you look around at the people that you work with or the people that you know who don't use NFP, who don't know anything about NFP. And they're doing the best they can, right? But like there's so many struggling marriages. There's so many, sex causes so many issues in marriages when it should be something that brings people together, not drives them apart. And I think there's just so many tools inside NFP and so many things that NFP requires of us, sacrifices and intentionalities that it requires from us that make us better and bring us closer together with our spouse. So,
in our relationship, we didn't start doing NFP until after we'd already had a couple of kids. And it's something as we put it into our life, I can tell you, if we would have started that way, the extra richness that would have been present earlier in our relationship.
Same thing. There's times where it's been really challenging for us and it's required some sacrifice. There's been times where it's just been easy and just felt like a normal part of life, and that's changed a little bit. It's certainly gotten easier since the first year or two. I think that's the hardest part is you learn this brand new system. You want to use it well because the stakes are high, and so there's a learning curve involved, and so I don't know. I think those first couple of years are challenging, but after that, it's just become a part of who we are. It's become a part of how we do life.
So here's a question for the group: what is our role as men in NFP? Right, because we're not the one taking measurements, doing those observations. Right. What's our role? How do we be a good husband and a good, good supporter, and like you said, being able to understand the chart.
We're still kind of trying to navigate, NFP. We're still trying to wrap our heads around what that looks like.
Yeah, NFP is definitely probably the hardest, but also the most rewarding part of our marriage.
That's reassuring for sure, just because, we're not really sure if we're ready to start a family or how quickly we want to conceive, and we're just trying to be open to life, but also make sure that I'm figuring everything out. How do you feel like your husbands took to NFP?
The thing that we figured out was really good, just so that my husband John could take on some of the ownership, was for him to be responsible for asking me every night, what was your marker for the day? What do we need to write down? And we were doing paper chart at the time, and now we've just switched over to the app, which I love, but we have it synced together so that he can access the chart from his phone and I can from mine. But yeah, for him to ask every night made it feel like, okay, it's not all on me to be doing this, and if he forgot, then he wouldn't be blaming me for not having charted, if he...
On that, we came from the opposite side of it, where we met young, got married young, and birth control was a huge part of our lives at that point because we really heavily depended on that. I had never heard of NFP growing up in a Protestant home, and then we decided to take the leap of faith and convalidate our marriage, and so we went through the marriage prep process with that. At first, it seemed like another thing I was going to have to learn. coming into the church and trying to figure out what our marriage was going to look like after that. It was a scary thing. And then on top of it, to have to learn, oh, my body might need to change, but just seeing the difference between what my body was doing before and what it was really made for. And then feeling like I could take the pressure off of me and finally not have to make it just about me making sure I'm taking the pill at the right time, or opening it up to my husband too, and watching him step into that role as a man. It's just completely transformed our marriage. I can never imagine my life now without that,
Dr. Les Ruppersberger and Dr. Mike Manhart answer the important question, does NFP actually work? And how effective is it compared to contraceptives?
Hi, I'm Mike Manhart, and as mentioned in the previous module, I'm a scientist with a background in drug development and clinical trials. I'm here today with Dr. Les Ruppersberger. Hi, Les.
Hi, Mike. How are you? It's good to be with you again today. My background is a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist with over 40 years in clinical practice, and we're here today to answer the question that we hear all the time, does natural family planning really work? The good news is, yes, it really does work. So let's talk about what we mean by that, Mike.
Yeah, well, why don't we take a step back? Before we talk about natural family planning, let's start with understanding how hormonal contraceptives work, because that's the more common thing at the moment.
Yeah, one of the problems that most women don't realize is that when they get a prescription for hormonal contraception, they're really never told about the mechanism of action or the side effects. So I always used the package insert when I was in clinical practice that documents how hormonal contraception works and its 3 mechanisms of action. First, that it blocks ovulation, but not all the time. Second, that it changes cervical mucus so that it interferes with sperm migration. And the final one that's ignored mostly is that it thins out the lining of the uterus and prevents implantation of the embryo. It was in the 1980s that the American College of OBGYN redefined the beginning of pregnancy as beginning with implantation and not beginning with fertilization. However, almost every genetics and embryology book that's ever been published has documented that the beginning of life and the beginning of pregnancy is with fertilization when the sperm fertilizes the egg. There are about 6.1 million pregnancies in the United States every year, and half of these pregnancies each year are unintended, and half of those are while using contraceptives. They are not foolproof. The majority of women who go on hormonal contraceptives, as I said, do not read the package insert and are not given fully informed consent by their practitioners and the potential side effects. And failure to give informed consent is considered negligence and a crime in many jurisdictions. The package insert itself reviews the slightly increased risk for breast cancer, the slightly increased risk for stroke, an increased risk for blood clots, an increased risk of gallbladder disease, heart attacks, and an increased risk on the effect of many autoimmune diseases such as lupus and inflammatory bowel disease, as well as an increased risk for minor things such as vaginal infections and urinary tract infections. There are also increased risks for many cancers, including cancer of the breast, cancer of the cervix, and cancer of the liver, as well as benign liver tumors. Yes, there are some reported incidences of a reduction in uterine cancer and ovarian cancer, but they're far outweighed by the risk of the other cancers that I just mentioned.
Right. And it's a shame. There's a lot of data on that link the hormonal birth control with cancer, particularly breast cancer.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're absolutely correct. In 1975, the risk of in situ breast cancer was noted to have increased by over 400%, and that was a mere 15 years after hormonal contraceptives came on the market, and again, most likely due to the much higher doses of estrogen that were in the pills in those beginning years. In 2017, in the New England Journal of Medicine, had followed over 1.8 million women for over 10 years and showed that hormonal contraception had reflected a 38% increase in breast cancer. A lot of people looking for a fertility awareness-based method, and they look for statistics that document the effectiveness of these. And so I'll turn it over to you, Mike, to talk a little bit about the statistics from the literature that you've worked with and the research that you've done to show us the facts and figures that there is science behind natural family planning.
Yes, we can get a sense of the effectiveness of NFP and contraceptives by looking at the large studies in actual populations. In other words, what's really happened in the real world. But before we jump into the numbers, we've got to step back a bit and talk about how effectiveness is measured. In research, these things are called unintended pregnancies because they're pregnancies that happen because people are taking something to prevent a pregnancy and they got it. The contraceptive literature calls these unintended pregnancies failures. But when you understand all the things that have to go right to make a baby and have come out with 10 fingers and 10 toes, it's really more of a miracle. That's why I like to use the term unintended pregnancy. So we measure unintended pregnancies two ways. There's perfect use and typical use. And perfect use is when you take or use the method exactly as is prescribed. So you take the pill at the same time every day, you never miss a dose, you use the barrier the same way, you follow all the rules in NFP. Unfortunately, very few of us in this world are perfect every day. So the other way to look at it is typical use. And that's what includes both those perfect days and those not so perfect days when we forget to do things exactly right. So if we look at typical effectiveness for contraceptives, the pill has an unintended pregnancy rate of about 6 to 9% in typical use. That means for about every 100 women who start taking a pill, 6 to 9 of them are going to be pregnant within a year, even though they didn't want to be. The condom has an unintended pregnancy rate of about 15% in typical use. That's a little higher than most people would expect. And the IUDs, in contrast, have a very low typical rate of about 1%. That's pretty close to their perfect rate. And that's because once it's inserted by the physician, you don't really have to do much. Now, when we turn to natural family planning methods, they have effectiveness rates. They're in the same range as the pill or the condom. I was part of a team that reviewed over 30 studies of specific NFP methods, and what we concluded from this is a number of things. The modern calendar-based methods, called standard days, has about an unintended pregnancy rate of around 12%. The mucus-only methods have an unintended pregnancy rate of about 10 to 22% or so. And the symptothermal method, as taught by Couple to Couple League, and the Marquette model, when it uses the hormone monitor alone, have typical rates of unintended pregnancy rate of less than 5%. So that's at least comparable and possibly even a little better than hormonal contraceptives. So it's clear that natural family planning methods can be at least as effective as contraceptives or more effective, particularly if both the man and the woman are involved in the process and they're in it together as a team.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say from a health standpoint, it's been probably better for Brooke's health for a number of reasons. There have been a number of benefits in ways that she's gotten medical attention for things that we wouldn't have known about otherwise. Mm-hmm. So there's that. From a relationship standpoint, it's brought us closer together in communication. It's it's really honestly and counterintuitively been a huge leverage for intimacy in our life. Mm-hmm. It's really helped us to be intimate with each other more intentionally, and so I think that's been really good. From a faith standpoint, it's encouraged us to rely more on God and trust in His plan for us, but include Him in our decisions. It's not that we have no control over the size of our family, we absolutely do, but we have invited God into those decisions that we make, and in a more practical way than we would have otherwise. I think it's really encouraged us to trust in His goodness, mm-hmm. In making our decisions for our family.